Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. Senator, by the way, a shout out to Bill Melugin. I didn't want to embarrass him by saying it to his face, but nobody knows more about what ICE does and doesn't do than Bill Melugin. He's the perfect person to be monitoring what obnoxious comments are being made by politicians inside the Beltway who never have to put their life on the line the way any one of those ICE agents do. I mean, isn't it true that the sanctuary cities and states that allow these hundreds of violent criminals loose despite ICE detainers pose a much bigger threat to public safety than ICE itself does?
Oh, David, you're 100% correct on that. And what we know from polling is that the American people want to get these criminals out of their communities and cities and states and out of the country. And you can look at poll after poll. A vast majority of all Americans want them to be deported. They want them to be removed from their communities because they've committed rape and murder, aggravated assault, drug trafficking, child trafficking, sex trafficking, and of course, they want them apprehended. And it's important to note the people that ICE is going after, they already have orders of deportation against them. And if these local officials would work with ICE, then you wouldn't have ICE out in the communities because they would have a couple of ICE agents go to the jail and pick these individuals up and move them to federal custody for their deportation. It's as simple as that. And David, I've said so many times, you can look at the great success we've had in Memphis, where crime is down over 50% in 120 days with the Memphis Safe Task Force. That's 20 federal agencies, the National Guard, the Tennessee Highway Patrol, and they've made 6,500 arrests, found 148 missing children, and you've got Democrat elected officials that have worked with federal government agencies, and therefore the city is safer and the people in the city are safer.
And since when can a sanctuary city, or sometimes sanctuary states, since when can they refuse to cooperate with federal authorities? I mean, whatever happened to the Supremacy Clause?
And, you know, we are going to give them the opportunity to vote if they want to keep that or if they want to do away with these sanctuary city policies. And I think that every Democrat should vote to do away with these sanctuary city policies because it is a way for people to avoid complying with U.S. law.
Yeah, and it's not just the mayors or the governors, we should say, all these local judges. I mean, part of the Supremacy Clause is that state judges are bound by federal law. They are bound not by state law, but by federal law, even if they are state judges, and yet they have been supporting the sanctuary cities. When is the Supreme Court going to come and put their foot down and stop this nonsense?
Well, and we would like to see the Supreme Court take up some of these cases that are waiting before them. And it is just important to note that the American people agree with where President Trump and Republicans are. Criminal, illegal aliens need to be deported.
Yeah.
And they want to see people abide by the rule of law, and they want to see compliance with the rule of law. And, you know, David, all these millions that came in under Joe Biden, making certain that people that have committed crimes that have these records are removed from our communities. And we've seen enough personal injury, loss of life, heartbreak and sadness, and people want these criminals removed from the country.
And it's not like the president is not moving on this. He made a concession.
Right.
They changed people. They brought Tom
Right.
Homan in. He's pulling back on the number of agents. So the White House is making an effort. The federal government is making an effort to satisfy the local government and the state government, and they're still intransigent. I want to move on, though, to the SAVE Act. This, of course, requires voter ID, which, by the way, the latest polls, I think we can put them up, show that more than 80% of the American public favor voter ID. Even 71% of Democrats favor it. I want to play a little clip of President Trump talking about this and get your reaction. Roll it.
Well, you know, we're working on the Save America Act, which is going to secure up a lot of things, but secure up our voting. I think people would like to do it, and I think Democrats would too. You know, when you go to voter ID and you ask Democrats, it's polling at 82% with Democrats. I'm not talking about Democrat politicians. I'm talking about Democrats. We have to do something about our voting.
Okay, well, we see 71%, maybe he's looking, but still it's the overwhelming majority of Democrats want the thing. When will it pass?
And I am hopeful we're going to get this passed very soon. President Trump is exactly correct on this. It is overwhelmingly popular. You know, you show an ID when you pick up a prescription, when you go to check into a hotel or check into a flight, go to your child's school, go for a doctor's appointment. You're always showing an ID. And now they want ICE to have to show an ID to do their job, but they don't want people to show an ID to vote. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you they want to make it easy to cheat when it comes to voting because they are interested in power for themselves. They are not interested in protecting people. They're not interested in protecting the ballot box or protecting communities from criminal, illegal aliens.
Well, they're on the wrong side. They're against the American people on this one. Very quickly, we only have about 20 seconds. The Arctic frost scandal that turned lawfare into policy by the previous administration. You're chairing a hearing about it tomorrow. Who and what are we going to hear?
We're going to hear from the telecom execs that turned over records of from not only the members of the U.S. Senate, but there are 400 groups and individuals, conservative groups and individuals that had banking or telecommunication records. So we're going to start this hearing to find out exactly what they served up to Jack Smith for Arctic frost.
I think you should call him Jack Frost. That's apropos. Marsha Blackburn, great to see you again. Thank you so much. We'll be watching the hearing tomorrow.